After my presentation, I looked at different rubrics that I was using and ways that I could incorporate that into my teaching. I've used this site Forallrubrics in the past to design rubrics, but that I've designed entirely. What I did this time, composing a rubric using student voice, was the first 3 criteria I guided students towards, but we talked in great length about what this particular project should be marked on. So the project was about the Blue Mountains, as the title says. It was about crossing the Blue Mountains and the impact of the need for land and the need for what that did for the colony of New South Wales by opening up the land. So I said to the students there were 2 things that I really needed for marking purposes. I needed the 2 items that I've got at the bottom there, which are basically writing conventions and presentation. So what the presentation looked like, whether or not they could spell correctly, all those sorts of nuts and bolts things that I wanted. But essentially the 3, if you like, inquiry-based question areas were the ones that I handed over to them, and we talked at length about what those things should look like. At the end of our discussion, we were able to put them into some categories, such as, whether or not what they were talking about was reliable, whether it was accurate, whether or not they were interpreting information or they were just regurgitating information, and whether or not there's any evidence that they'd actually done research, or whether they had just written about, their holiday to the Blue Mountains last December. Then we went through and worked out and talked about what would an outstanding piece of work look like, what would be missing from it if it wasn't outstanding, what would we say, look, I'm sorry, but you haven't put the effort in, this is worth 0 points, and so forth. We sat down, we worked out different language to use. So for instance, interpreting information was about, showing analysis of information and the importance of the information they presented. Now, whether the degree to which they did that would demonstrate whether or not they got a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 as a mark. So an outstanding, a high, a sound, a basic, or a limited. These were then printed up as part of the project that we were doing. They were given to the students, so they had them to always refer back to. But then, because it was a spoken presentation, or it didn't have to be a spoken presentation, most of them chose to do that, but they needed to present something to the rest of the class. They chose one of their friends or someone they thought would give them honest feedback, and I chose someone so that along with those 2 plus myself, there are actually 3 people marking this piece of work. So there was a lot of peer involvement in terms of marking, and the students weren't great at it because it was really one of the first times we had done this. And they always wanted to be super nice. I liked the sound of your voice, you spoke well, you spoke loudly. A couple of kids went out on a bit of a limb and said, that's different to what I found, because essentially they were doing the same topic. And I thought that was really interesting that they were able to finally start to discern some of those differences in reliability, historical accuracy, and things like that. So from that, we expanded this to the next project we did, where we looked about notable achievements in the world of electricity. And I think the students did a lot better too, also in terms of the feedback they were able to provide with this.